Hello, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to review the Los Gatos real estate market analysis for May of 2009. My name is Robert Whitelaw. I'm a licensed real estate broker in the state of California, a member of the National Association of Realtors, and a certified E-Pro, and I am also the president and CEO of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services. Now, if you'd like to get in contact with me, or if you'd like to reading of my articles on real estate, listen to any of my podcasts, or watch any of my other videos on various markets, you can check those out at my website at www.soldbyrobert.com. If you'd like to get in contact with me directly by mail, feel free to send those to robert@soldbyrobert.com. If you'd like to call me directly, feel free to dial 408-852-0525. And if you use AOL Instant Messenger, Google Talk, or Yahoo IM, you can get in touch with me using any of those with the screen name The Rebel Broker, all one word. And if you're a Skype user, just use the screen name Rebel Broker. Of course, referrals are always appreciated. If you or anyone you know is interested in buying, selling, or investing in real estate anywhere in Silicon Valley, please feel free to get in contact with me, and I'll help you any way I can. Finally, even if you're interested in areas completely outside of Silicon Valley, you have no interest in real estate anywhere where I work, I can still help you find the agent just for your needs. If you're interested in buying, selling, or investing in any kind of real estate, you just give me a call. Let me know what your preference is, and I'll find the right agent for you in the area where you're interested in shopping. So let's go ahead and jump right in and take a look at the numbers for May of 2009 for Los Gatos. This is going to be interesting, particularly if you've already watched the Santa Clara County results for May of 2009. Now, if you haven't, I'd suggest you go ahead and look at that first, or if you're just determined to listen to this first, finish with this, then head right over to Santa Clara County, because the comparison is very interesting. Because, as some of you may know, Los Gatos is actually in Santa Clara County, and Los Gatos historically, I mean, if you just go back 6 months, Los Gatos has usually outperformed Santa Clara County. So it's kind of interesting to compare and contrast how Los Gatos is performing when compared to the county in general right now. It's interesting for those of us who aren't working with this particular economy or working in that particular town. For the folks in that situation, particularly the sellers, not a great thing to be experiencing right now. Let's go ahead and look at these numbers and explore that concept a little bit. The first thing we're going to look at is the inventory numbers. Now, if you'll think back, if you're a regular watcher of my market videos, you might remember back when things first started going a little bit nuts in Santa Clara County a couple of years ago, and those first things that we were seeing were really big increases in the inventory numbers. Those were really the first thing to go. Santa Clara County managed to continue on with continuing increasing prices despite the fact inventory was going up so high. And really, the market just sort of came to its standstill until those things adjusted. Now that we have lower prices, things are starting to move. Now, Los Gatos has apparently been a little bit late to arriving at this point. If you look at how things are right now in Santa Clara County, it's really hard to come to any conclusion other than Los Gatos is definitely having a worse time of it. Now, the inventory numbers are not great. We actually have an increase in inventory in Los Gatos, a 16.15% increase. That's 26 more homes on the market in Los Gatos than at the same time last year. Now, remember, this chart only gives us the numbers for the month of May going back to 1999. So there's no reason to adjust for seasonal influences or any of those kinds of things. So just a month of May. And on a year-to-year basis, we've definitely seen growth in the number of homes on the market. That gives us a grand total of 187 homes currently on the market in Los Gatos. If we now look at the number of homes that were listed, this is at least a little bit more encouraging. If this number could go down more, we'd be in a better place. Clearly, the folks are starting to realize the market in Los Gatos has slowed, and they're just not listing their homes on the same pace as they did last year. But when you really look at it compared to 2007, it really hasn't seen much growth or movement in any direction. So relatively speaking, it's pretty flat. We're actually seeing a decline of 14.71% in the number of new listings for the month of May in 2009. That's 10 fewer homes listed at the same time this year when compared to last year. That gave us a grand total of 58 homes that were listed in Los Gatos in May. Now, finally, let's look at the sales numbers, and this is particularly annoying just because it's not showing the same trend that we're seeing in other parts of the county. In fact, some of the areas that were hit the hardest, for instance, Morgan Hill, are seeing better performance numbers for sales when compared to Los Gatos. It's actually kind of a surprise because for so long, Los Gatos seemed to be almost bulletproof in this market we've been seeing. Now, sales are down, as I mentioned. They're down 44.44%. That is 16 fewer homes sold in the month of May 2009 than in the same time last year. And that gives us a grand total of 20 homes that were sold in Los Gatos. Now, as always, I like to sort of take a step back and look at these numbers from two perspectives. One, how long would it take us to sell off everything in the inventory if all the numbers froze right now? So if the inventory numbers froze where they are right now and the sold numbers froze where they are right now, how many months would it take us to sell everything off? And that number stands at 9.35, so about 9.25 months, about 9 months and 1 week to get a home sold or to sell off all of the inventory currently in Los Gatos. Now, another way to look at this number is if you're a seller to think about how much competition you have. So this basically tells you for every home that sells, how many homes were there on the market. And for every home that sold in Los Gatos in May of 2009, there were about 9.25 homes on the market trying to get sold. So that's quite a bit more competition than we've seen in past months. Last month, that number stood at 7.64. So it's heading the wrong direction. Now, remember, Los Gatos has a relatively small sample size. We're talking about dozens of homes moving, buying and selling and listing and those types of things, whereas Santa Clara County, there are thousands and hundreds and much bigger numbers, so it's a much more reliable statistical number. So what we really need to do in an area like Los Gatos is look for longer trends and see what's going on. However, on the year-to-year comparison, I think we're pretty good as far not good, but I mean I think we're making a fairly decent comparison here. I've looked at the numbers and they seem pretty straightforward, and I'm not seeing anything that's skewing it one way or another. So I think this is a pretty accurate reflection of really what's going on in the market. Now, just to sort of calibrate you, for the county, the ratio we just talked about was at 4.5, so it had about 4.5 months of inventory on hand if the sold numbers froze where they are right now. So definitely not performing as well as the county, which is a surprise since the opposite was true for so very long while the market was going down. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the supply and demand numbers, the same numbers we just looked at, but instead of isolating just a specific month going back years, we're just going to look back month to month. So going all the way back to January of 2008. Let's see what sort of trend we've seen. Now, this is where seasonal influences will definitely play a part. Remember, this is month to month, and some months you'll see an odd jump in one number or another, and oftentimes that can be explained through different methods. And as we reach those moments with this data, I'll try to point those out as much as I can. But if you look at it now, you can see here we are in May of 2009. If we look back to May of 2008, try to look at what happened up to May, and you can see that from April to May of last year, we had a decline. We had actually a bigger decline in April to May of last year than we had in April to May of this year in inventory. That's fairly normal as we head into the selling season, right? As we start to head into May, June, July, that's typically the selling season where we see inventory numbers tending to go down a bit, and we saw that last year, and we've seen that also happen here. We've seen pretty consistent performance. When you look back to January of last year, going up all the way to May, you can see we had it ramp up where May was the first month where it really tended to drop. Same thing last year. So, since we're seeing the same trends last year, can this tell us anything about what we should expect for inventory numbers in the coming months? Well, if we look at last year, we can see that we saw flat performance from May to June and then more of a decline as we went into July and August. I don't see any reason to question that. I think that may continue, seeing as we really haven't seen any major deviations from what happened last year. Now, if we take a look at the number of homes that listed, we can see that number's been relatively flat. It's been declining a bit overall, as you can see from that averaging bar there that goes horizontally across the green bars. We've had a little bit of a drop from month to month, from April to May. I'll give you the specific statistics on that in a second. This is one of those things that oftentimes has more to do with whether or not someone's relisting their home or the psychology of the market at the time. So you'll see this being more of a varying number, but you'll almost always see some sort of a boost in the summer months or a little bit from January on until the summer months. You'll see the numbers starting to go up. We saw that a little bit last year. We saw it a little bit this year. We saw that the numbers were down in December, January, February, which is normal. And then we saw those numbers going up in March, April, and May. What's interesting is we saw a bigger drop from March into April than we did last year. But I think that that's not terribly unusual, because I think probably some sellers are clued into the idea that they're not going to get top dollar for their home right now. Now let's take a look at the sold numbers. You can see we've dropped off from last year. Between April and May, we actually saw a drop off in the number of homes sold. What's interesting is that if you average out, if you look at that graph going over the entire year, it's showing a general trend of down, which isn't really a good thing, and it's really not what we've seen in other communities. Now, if we sort of break all of these down into numbers, the inventory is actually down 2.09% between April and May of 2009. That's 4 fewer homes in inventory in May than we had in April. So that's actually relatively good news. Now, listed homes is also down 4.92%. That's 3 fewer homes listed in the month of May than in the month of April. And sales were down 20%. That's 5 fewer homes sold in the month of May than in the month of April. Now, let's go ahead and sort of get a little perspective on what homes are actually getting sold. What types of homes are we seeing? Foreclosures, short sales, conventionals. What are we seeing? Now, last month you can see that short sales made up 8% of the total number of homes sold. Foreclosures made up 12%, and conventional sales made up 80%. Well, we're seeing basically the same breakup with the exception of short sales. This month, no short sales. No homes that were sold in Los Gatos in May of 2009 were short sale properties. However, 20% of the homes that sold were foreclosure properties. So what we've basically seen is a growth in the foreclosure market in Los Gatos to the point where it overtakes, it completely absorbs what we saw short sales doing last month. So we're left with the still 80% conventional sales, which is still pretty healthy. That's a good number. But for an awful long time, while a lot of other areas were dominated by short sales and foreclosures, we were seeing no short sales and foreclosures in Los Gatos. So this is definitely, at least it's a stable movement in this area for Los Gatos, which is nice because we saw a period of growth there. So maybe we're hitting the top of where this is going to happen in Los Gatos. However, I think because we're starting to see a period of time where things might not be moving in the right direction in other areas in Los Gatos, this may not continue to be the case. But let's move on and see if we can get any more clarity on this. You'll see in a minute why I am anticipating that we may see increases in short sales or foreclosures. Now, let's talk about prices. The next most important thing, maybe the first thing for most folks, is how much can I get for my house? We'll first look at how much homes actually sold for. This is the average price, and you can see it's been declining since 2007. Big drop between 2008 and 2009. Now, the average home price in Los Gatos was down 22.77%. That's a $327,600 drop in the average price of homes in Los Gatos. The median, which we're showing here in a graph, has actually dropped more than the average, which indicates that more properties are being that are selling. The bulk of homes that are selling are at the lower end of the pricing spectrum and are a little bit more below what the average price is than they were at the same time last year. Remember, this is year to year, so we're looking at the month of May, just going back to 1999. So there's no seasonal changes here, as I've said before. This is strictly what went on in the month of May. Now, median change is down 26.53%. That's a $365,500 drop. That gave us a median price of $1,012,000. So what does this tell us? Well, first, it lets us know that prices are going down. Now, why does this play into the foreclosure and short sale numbers that we were talking about a moment ago? Well, as these prices continue to drop, the average prices continue to drop, what you end up getting is a situation where homeowners potentially are now owing more on their properties than they're worth, and that's where you sort of end up into a short sale situation. Now we'll see how this plays out. It's interesting that we've got an increase in the foreclosure numbers without an increase in the short sales sort of preceding it, because we actually saw short sales show a really big spike in growth in the county in general, and then foreclosures pretty much overtook that. That kind of makes sense on some level. But we didn't see that here in Los Gatos. Things seem to be happening at an accelerated pace. I know it took a while for folks in Santa Clara County, sellers, to sort of recognize if we're going to sell this property, we have to drop the price. It took a while for that to sink in. Maybe we're seeing the same. Maybe we're seeing that phenomenon not playing out as much in Los Gatos, since they've already sort of had their expectations set by what the county in general was experiencing, and so they're sort of going along with the idea that the market's down and they have to accept lower prices to get their home sold. We'll see how it pans out. We'll see how we do in future months. but it's definitely looking like that's the direction things are going. Now let's take a look at what actually sold. Now the highest priced single-family residential home in Los Gatos was at 19 Hernandez Avenue. That sold for $2.5 million. Its list price was $2.6 million. Now, unfortunately, this is another one of those properties where the numbers really don't tell the whole story. The list price on the MLS does indicate $2.6 million, but in reality, they took it off the market for a couple of months, perhaps to do some work on it. Perhaps they had some other needs, but they really tried to start selling this property back in November of '08. And they listed it originally then for $2.875, and then when they relisted it a few months later, they relisted it for $2.6. So it actually took a lot longer than the 30 days that was reported for getting this home sold. And it ended up going for quite a bit lower, farther below list price than they originally had wanted. Beautiful home, though. I don't know if anyone. It's a beautiful home. I had an opportunity to see it early on in its listing period, and I'm glad to see that home moved because it was really a nice property. Now, the lowest priced home in Los Gatos was at 14345 Capri Drive. That sold for $550,000. Original list was $649,000, and that sold in 60 days. No number shenanigans with this particular property. It was listed when it said it was listed. It was on the market for the amount of time it said it was on the market. So that's a good sale. And again, it's far below what the average price is. So again, it's reinforcing. And it sold relatively quickly, so it's sort of reinforcing that idea that we're seeing a little bit more action at the lower end of the spectrum. Now, the average price per square foot was $537.52. Now, last month that stood at $548.07, and with the change in average price, it just makes sense that we're seeing a drop in that price per square foot. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at these same home prices over past months. Now, this is not just the month of May. This is going all the way back to January of 2008. We'll see if we can see any indicators here of where we might be going. You can see a general trend of decline in home prices. Now, remember, this can be a little bit more prone to being skewed one way or another. When you're only selling, 10 to 20 homes per month, one very expensive home can sometimes skew this number. I've reviewed the data, and that isn't something we really need to be concerned with here. So these numbers we're seeing are pretty accurate. And this is the mean. And this just gives us an idea of where the total number of where the homes, the prices of the homes, where they were clustered. So, for instance, in the month of January of '09, you can see that we actually had a median that was higher than the average, which basically indicates that we tended to sell more homes at the higher end of the spectrum in that particular case. Now, that's a little unusual given the current market, but it happens, and you can see that normally we had the average price being quite a bit higher than the median. That just happened to be one of those one-off months where we had a higher price. And that's the reason why I include the median here, simply because it gives you a clue that you might need to look a little more closely at the data you're working with to see what's pushing those numbers one way or the other. So I think once you compensate for that, you can see we've got a pretty steady decline in average price that I think falls in pretty correctly with the previous numbers we've reviewed. It just makes sense. And of course, once we reach the sweet spot on price, you'll see those inventory numbers drop just like we did for the county. Now, as I said, the average price in Los Gatos was $1,111,275. The price change from April to May of 2009 was an increase of 7.34%. That was a dollar change of $75,949. And the median price change was an increase of 5.97%. That's a dollar amount of $57,000. And again, the total number of homes that sold in Los Gatos in the month of May was 20. Now let's look at the number of days it took to get homes sold on average. You'll see that this number seems a little bit high. Unfortunately, this is coming up a little slower than I'd like it to. We'll have to tweak that. Now you can see that the number really ramped up in 2007. In 2008, we had 41. And then in 2009, it was 75 days in the month of May to get a home sold. That's a net increase of 82.93%. That's 34 more days to get a home sold than the same time last year. The longest days on the market was, the lowest days on the market was 2 days. The longest days on the market was 242 days. The next closest to that high number was 188. And to sort of give you an idea of the spread, where those numbers were laying, 0 homes sold before they could be put onto the MLS. 2 homes sold in the first week they were listed. 6 homes sold in 8 to 30 days. 4 homes sold in 31 to 90 days. And 5 homes sold in 91 to 180 days. and 2 homes sold in 180 days or more. If you do the math on that, it reveals that 40% of the homes sold in 30 days or less. So that's a pretty good chunk of the homes. So almost half of the homes that did sell sold in 30 days or less. So that's pretty good news. So the bulk seems to be the bulk of the homes that are getting sold seem to be huddled a little bit below the average here, but I think that's still a reasonable average to set expectations for sellers as far as when you think you're going to get your home sold, or what sort of a plan you should make on the timing for your home getting sold. I think the key here is just realizing that you need to be getting out there and seeing the homes that you're competing with, not just seeing the homes that have sold. You don't want to just do a market analysis pricing of your property. That technique doesn't work anymore. You can't just look at solds and say, here's what I will price my home at based on what the solds are. You need to know what your competition is. You need to know what the properties in your area are, the ones that have similar amenities to yours. You need to be the most desirable property at your price point to beat out the competition on this. And competition's getting more fierce in Los Gatos, so you definitely need to have an agent who's aware of those challenges and can take steps to give you the greatest level of positive visibility that you can get. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the days to sell just in past months. This again is going back to January of 2008. Now, the days to sell is actually up 8.7%. That is 6 more days to get a home sold in May of 2009 than it was taking in April of 2009. Again, March was one of those months where we had a couple of homes that really had a big number of days on market, which kind of skewed that number up a little bit. Remember, with the number of homes that we get sold, things that are way out there as far as number of days on market can really skew it. But you can see just in general, when we were averaging all this stuff out, sort of trying to minimize these extreme peaks and extreme valleys, you can see we're getting on average a steady increase in the days on market. I think this month's reporting was pretty close on. So I think those are, as I said, I think those are pretty realistic expectations to set for yourself if you're a seller trying to get a home sold. Now let's go ahead and take a quick look at where the locations of these properties were. This map is courtesy of Bing.com and the Microsoft Corporation. You can see that there's no real clustering. What's interesting is we have a lot fewer things selling in downtown Los Gatos. Everything seems to be sort of grouped on the east side of the freeway, which is kind of interesting. You usually see a little bit more selling in the downtown area. It's nice to be able to be a walk. The most expensive home that sold this month actually was just a few blocks away from downtown and a block over from a park. So that was a really well located property. But you can see that most of the things out here are a little bit further out from the center of Los Gatos. And if you look at this, that sort of reflects the pricing. As you can see these areas where most of these properties sold are ones that typically don't tend to be at the high end of pricing in Los Gatos. Los Gatos is already a pretty high-priced on average community, but you can see that the locations of some of these properties kind of give a little bit of a revelation on why we saw the medium price below average price and noticed that they were getting huddled there below average. Now, I do appreciate you taking the time to listen to these market analysis. If you'd like to get in contact with me, here's that information again. I won't read it all off to you. I'll just put it up here on the screen so that if you'd like to get in touch, you have all of those methods right at your disposal. Again, if you have any questions, ideas, suggestions, or observations, or any information you'd like me to add to these reports, please feel free to get in touch, and I'll be happily consider anything that you have to suggest and see if I can't get it incorporated into the next report for you. Thanks again, and I will talk to you all next time.